Hi, my name's Ricky. I'm one of those virtual tubers that you've been hearing so much about. Now, when I started looking into different ways that I could improve the audio quality of my broadcasts, I started running into one of two different kinds of videos. Either videos that were very dense and it was hard to parse what information was relevant for the kinds of things that I was trying to do, or they didn't give you enough information and the person really gave you their settings and said, yeah, just copy these over. This is what I use. It's fine. The only problem is that I'm recording in a different environment with different equipment than those people, and so the settings that work for one person are probably not going to work for me. So I wanted to make a video that kind of threads between the two of them, and I wanted to break down the settings that I use, but also what those settings actually represent and why I came to the decisions that I did. So I'm going to be using Streamlabs OBS for this video, but the other OBS versions will work as well, plain Jane OBS, what have you. We're really going to be drilling down into looking at really those basic plugins that are available right now. They literally came with your Xbox. So let's get into it. When you go into it, you're going to want to set up your audio channels. So I record with an AT2020 microphone and a Scarlett Solo audio interface. But this is going to work with whatever. If it's your webcam microphone or a different mic, it's all fine. It's all plugins, and they're all default in OBS. All that matters is that you get it going into the software. Click over here on the gear setting and go over to your filters. And now looking at the first thing you're going to see here, I have a couple things already set up, but when in terms of noise suppression, this one's pretty simple because the difference between them is largely just CPU usage. If you have extra CPU power sitting around, you can probably just set up to RN noise and it'll be fine. But if you're looking to save computer power, you can just use speaks, and they're basically going to do the same thing. RN noise tends to be a little bit better in my experience. Now, when you go over to noise gates, things are going to get a little bit more complicated, but don't be scared. It's a lot simpler than it looks. So basically, a noise gate is going to consist of these two thresholds, your closed threshold and your open threshold. You're going to set these, and as the names imply, it's going to be that a sound has to get above a certain threshold before your microphone is going to start registering it, or if it falls below a certain threshold, your microphone is not going to register it. Basically, what this is really good for is setting boundaries wherein your microphone is cutting out low volume background noise while also really attenuating and focusing on your voice. So I have this set up right now so that if other noise is going on around me, if my dog comes in and shakes, if my vacuum is going, if there's noise from the traffic outside, it's not going to get picked up, even though I use a really sensitive microphone. Instead, I really have to be talking into it for any sound to come through. Now, in terms of these other points here, attack time, hold time, and release time, attack time you're generally going to want to set pretty low. Basically, it's saying how quickly do these effects kick in. Hold time is how long does the change in volume have to really be around before a gate opens or closes. And release time is once a gate opens or closes, how long does it really take for it to shift? So if I stop talking, I have to stop talking for a particular amount of time for the gate to close, and then release time is going to be a deal with how long it takes for that effect to really kick in. Now, moving on to compressors. This is probably where the real magic happens. What is a compressor? It does exactly what it sounds like. It compresses your audio in. So if you have, let's say, a big range in your voice, it's going to compress it down to make it into a smoother listening experience. So how does that work? The first thing is going to be your threshold. I have mine set relatively high because I don't have a lot of background noise. But I set at this threshold and I say, once my audio gets above this point, the compressor is going to kick in and it is going to compress it at a ratio of 4:1. That is to say that for every 1 decibel that the sound gets above this threshold, it is going to compress it for every 4 decibels, it's going to compress it down by 1. So if it gets above by 8 decibels, it's going to compress it by an extra 2, etc. So as you can tell, the lower the ratio is, the more intense the effect is going to be. And there are a couple different ways you can configure this, but by and large, this is just what has worked for me. Setting a more intense or a more powerful set of compression, it seems like 4 is pretty usual for studios. That generally tends to kick in when I am about to clip my microphone or I'm speaking, and generally that's going to keep me in this yellow range here where I want to stay. Now, attack is going to be the same as it was before with the noise gates. You want to keep this as low as possible. I set this as 1. Release, again, is once you kind of fall below the threshold again in speaking, how long does it take before the sound lets up? And output gain is going to be a little bit different. So you might not even need to set anything here. It's going to depend on how you want to configure your audio. Now, if you wanted to say, for example, maybe set a more aggressive threshold, I'm going to set this at like, let's say, for example, 35. You can see that my audio is immediately much quieter. And to make it even more dramatic, let's set it to 50 and be very intense. Look how quiet my audio just got over there. I'm using a different version of OBS to record this, so these effects aren't going to come through on the video, but you can kind of see even immediately, wow, yeah, you were all the way over here, and now your audio is much quieter because it is kicking in the compression effect much earlier and with much quieter signals. If you want to do that, if you want to have a more intense compression like that, you can make up for that by increasing output volume and getting yourself back up, usually into that high green to yellow range that you want to stay in. But I don't particularly like that. It doesn't really work for me, and I don't really love the overall effect there, but that might be something that works for you. Now, since we talked about compressors, I want to talk about limiters as well. Now, limiters are basically the same thing. They're just compressors that have very high ratios. So remember, we talked about thresholds and ratios, right? The ratio is the degree of compression. They have very high degrees of compression. And so I want to set this for an even higher threshold. I had to set to 17 on just out of my normal one, but my limiter is set to 12. And what this is saying that if it goes above to this secondary threshold, it kicks in with an even higher point, right? And so basically, this only really kicks in when I'm just about to clip my microphone. So if I'm playing a scary game and I scream or I yell, then it's going to kick in and so on. So between the compressor and the limiter, what I end up with is a very smooth audio experience. And then in conjunction with the noise suppression and the noise gates, generally I can eliminate a lot of background noise and then really smooth out the way that my voice sounds so that I can just kind of talk comfortably when I'm streaming and trust that I'm going to sound pretty good. It's nice, actually. Now, there is one other cool trick I do want to show y'all before I end this video, and that's another application of compressors. So this is what we call sidechain ducking. So what I'm going to do here, and you can see there are a couple things that are immediately different, right? I have a much lower ratio. That is to say, again, if to the extent that I exceed the threshold, which I've set to be more aggressive, there's a more general curve here. So setting it at a ratio of 10 to 1 is that for every 10 decibels that a sound gets above the threshold, it's going to be reduced by 1 decibel. So it's a smoother curve. But I keep my release at about 200, so it's smoothed out, and my attack low as well. But this is the one thing that's where the magic is really going to happen, and that's sidechain ducking. So sidechain ducking kicks in when there is audio coming in from my audio source. And that is to say that if I start talking, this compressor kicks in. So just to illustrate, I'm going to play a little bit of Dova Syndrome background music. Pretty cool, right? Pretty comfy. And you can see that that was kicking into about the same range as my voice. Now I'm going to do something a little bit different and play that while the compressor is active. And we're going to see how the sidechain ducking is going to work, and it should be pretty impressive. So let's turn this off. And now as I'm talking, see the sound of the audio and the music is really competing with my own signal. It's getting kind of muddy, right? But then I turn on the compressor, and you can see that immediately it's lowering the volume of the music, so I can just talk without having to worry about ever actually really needing to talk over something. It's wonderful and works really well if you have games going on or music in the background, because, I don't know, maybe if you're like me, you might feel sometimes like you need to talk over something, particularly if it's kind of loud in your headphones, and then you end up with kind of jumbled audio and you're speaking outside of a comfortable range, and that's no good. So the nice thing about this is by putting this on, you can set this up and have a really nice audio experience and have a really cool effect. And then the release is going to, the reason I have this set higher is because I want this to be high enough that it's not lowering and raising the volume of the music in between words while I'm speaking, while also giving sort of a punchy effect. So I don't really have to worry about it, but it's not really oscillating wildly while I'm talking. And that's really what I got here. I hope this was actually kind of useful. Maybe you even learned something. If this was useful, you can give me a follow over on Twitter or on Twitch where I usually stream. And yeah, that's about it for me. I hope you had fun. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can also click subscribe, I guess. But yeah, hopefully this was useful. I'd like to do more content like this in the future. So let me know if it's helpful. Take care.